everybody, it's Movie Dragon 009 back again with some more movie reviews. Now, I'm just going to come out straight. I have not seen Man of Steel. I'm so sorry about that. It's been a couple weeks since I announced that I would see the movie, and I have not. Oh boy, I don't know what that makes me. So, yeah. Well, there's just a lot of reasons I have not. Mostly it's because I've just been swamped with, schoolwork, and I don't really have, funds for it. Not immediately, but, I will try to let you know as soon as I see it. Shouldn't be very far off, I'm sure. But, I have seen some movies, and that does give me something to review. Now, what are those movies, you might ask? Well, there are two great classics. Frankenstein and his bride! Now, it was back in high school, I actually read the original novel by Mary Shelley, and I did a book report on that, and I thought it was very good. I guess that's what happens when you do a book report on something. It was a very good book, now that I think back about it. And I don't know why I haven't read it again. It's a good book. So, I was just wandering around the library at my school, and I saw these two guys down there, and I thought, why not, well, I should really read and watch these. I haven't watched them before, and I just thought, that'd be a good idea. Now, I'm going to be straight out with you guys again. I am not a horror fan. See, the thing is, a lot of horror movies I see out in the market, they're just more concerned with how much they can get you to wet yourself than actually saying something like philosophical or something. That, especially with torture porn movies like Saw. That's a big offender in my view, and oh boy, just a lot of movies these days. It's all about blood, guts, and it just doesn't work out. Not at all. Now, so, personally, me, as far as the element of fear is concerned in movies, I can take quite a bit of suspense. However, I'm kind of a wuss. But, I did think it was a good idea to look back at the old classics. So, let's start with the original Frankenstein. Now, everyone knows the story, I'm sure, but it was an interesting look to actually watch these movies. I'm going to admit, I actually saw Young Frankenstein first. I actually have the movie. Yeah, I saw this first. And that kind of affected the way I was looking at the movie. Yeah, just heads up, folks. Do not watch a parody of a movie before you see the movie that's being parodied. It kind of gives you a different experience. But now that I've seen the original, I can actually look in the parody and actually think that, I can actually get a lot of the jokes in there. There's quite a few scenes that they lovingly rip off. Anyway, not important. So, what did I think of the first Frankenstein? Well, I thought it was very good. It did take a lot of liberties with the original novel. Obviously, in the book, we don't know how Frankenstein actually brings about the monster. And I think that, well, here they actually give a fairly decent explanation, which works for the 30s, 40s era, I guess, whatever this movie came out. I think it was the 40s, wasn't it? Anyway, not important. And, well, to be honest, there were a lot of dumb decisions I noticed very early on. Among them, the main character, Frankenstein, he actually lets his assistant Fritz torture the monster. Why would you do that? Seriously, it's so stupid. And well, honestly, I thought the best performance was obviously Boris Karloff. You watch that thing, and he really does a good job at pantomiming expressions. There's a scene in there where he's reaching up to touch the light, and I think it just becomes a motif. It's just a very sad scene. It really makes you feel for the monster, along with all the other scenes he's in. And, boy, well, obviously everyone knows the story, so I'm just going to pick out some scenes that I thought were, were really great and kind of stupid. Now, there is that one scene where the monster actually meets a little girl at the edge of the lake, and they're throwing flowers at the lake, and I just thought, I'm sorry, I know it's supposed to be a tragic scene, but I can't help it. Oh my gosh. Logic just seems to have been thrown straight out the window in that scene. I'm not talking about the monster. I think as far as the scene works out, the monster just acts totally natural. The girl is throwing flowers in the water and they float. So the equation the monster is coming up with, flowers are pretty and they float. Girl is pretty. Will she float? Let's find out. So he throws her in and she sinks like a rock, obviously. And I just can't help but think, I mean, it's not even 3 feet from the shore. I mean, how deep is the water in this lake that she can't even... I mean, does it just drop? She doesn't know how to swim? I mean, come on, it wasn't that far. It was so stupid. Oh my gosh. I don't understand that. I mean, obviously the monster is to be pitied because he doesn't know any better, but the girl is like 3 or 5 feet away from shore. She's like a dog paddle there. I mean, seriously. Did the girl's father not teach her how to swim? Is that it? 5 feet away from shore. Anyway, I digress. So, obviously, we move on, and Frankenstein is getting his wedding going on, but then they bring in the little girl, and then the mob forms. Now, through all this, I want to mention that we do see Frankenstein's character evolve quite a bit through this movie. And it starts out like, oh, I'm gonna make this monster, and none of y'all are gonna stop me! You call me crazy? Well, watch this. Do you think this is crazy? And, he looks back after seeing the monster, like, I'm sorry, I got a little bit of dry throat. Kill his assistant and all this crazy stuff, and like, oh my gosh, I really gotta do something about this. And so, it's kind of sad, really. I mean, I wonder if he views himself as the father of this creature, and now he has to take responsibility for it. I mean, does anyone, like, actually, like, figure out, like, in the mob that Frankenstein actually made the monster? I don't think so. It doesn't look like it. Anyway, so he joins up with them. This is my problem. I've got to stop it. And then I just think, like, Frankenstein himself was, like, the most fascinating character in this movie, along with the monster, obviously. And, well, there was, like, a couple other really dumb scenes that I couldn't help but notice, but that's just me nipping. I can't think of them right off the top of my head. So, anyway, that was the original Frankenstein. I liked it quite a bit. And now we move on to The Bride of Frankenstein, which I have been led to believe is one of the greatest horror movies of all time. I really don't think so. It doesn't really strike me off as being horrific so much as campy, but I guess it's pretty understandable given how James Whale was actually homosexual. Yeah, well, I mean, it's not a general rule. I'm not saying that if you're a gay director, then all your movies have to be campy. Not like Joel Schumacher. I'm not gonna talk about him. Not because he's gay. Not at all. I mean, I don't believe in treating gay people like animals. No. That's just... But, yeah. Anyway, let's move on with the movie. Starting off, there's a very interesting scene, which is kind of silly, once I think about it, with the 3 authors. It's like George Purcell, I can't remember their names, but Mary Shelley was one of them. And it's just, for a horror movie, it starts out like, really? We're going with this scene with like the 3 richest people in the world, and the most successful authors and novelists just talking in a fancy house? I mean, I hear about the account, like, where Mary Shelley actually made up the story, and I don't see it like that. They were just, like, sitting away, like, pretty young things, just sewing, like, crochets or whatever those are. I kind of think of, like a little mountain cabin somewhere along this road. Obviously, that's not my vision. I don't know much about it, but I will research it. And, kind of a weird opening for a horror movie. It doesn't really feel like horror until we actually get back to the scene where, like, the villagers first burned down the windmill that the monster was in, and boy, yeesh, kind of a way to keep a monster alive. And it was like, oh, he didn't die at the top of the roof. He sank through the holes on the floor, and it turns out there was water at the bottom. Hooray! So the monster's alive. Hooray! Or maybe not. Oh! Or maybe... Ah! Whatever way you want to look at it. And, oh boy. And it goes on. And first thing I noticed is some major continuity issues. I mean, they replaced... You remember Frankenstein's, fiance? Yeah, they completely changed the actress. They went from a blonde to a brunette. I think people noticed that. And the settings are completely different. I mean... And they changed the Burgermeister's character too in the second one. So that got me for a little while. It made serious continuity issues. I am a man for continuity, ladies and gentlemen. That was just distracting. So distracting. So anyway, moving on. We meet up with Frankenstein after the monsters escaped and all that stuff. And he's thinking about all that's happened, and even though the first movie makes it pretty darn clear that he's not going to go back to making monsters again, the second one was like, oh man, that was terrible, but it was so awesome too, it was so close, and his wife's like, don't do it, man, and these are blasphemous, you can't think this way, and then she goes totally hysteric. I'm not sure quite why they made her such a, what's the word, sensitive character. She throws a hissy fit. It's like, oh! Please. And then we meet one of the most bizarre characters I've ever seen on screen. Dr. Pretorius is his name. And it's like, he just walks in. This guy is Mephistopheles. He freaking walks in. It's the same role. Like, it was in there. It's like, Dr. Frankenstein, I have a proposition for you. And he's like, dude, did you not see what Frankenstein went through? And Frankenstein's very much knowing of this. He knows what he's been through, and he's not eager to go back to it again. And, oh boy, this Pretorius guy is just really out there, man. And then he comes up and is like, well, you've done this, I've done this. And he pulls out, like, little major people. And this doesn't really feel like a horror movie. It feels like a comedy movie. Well, I guess it does bring, like, a much-needed, light-heartedness in the movie, but it doesn't really feel right for me. It doesn't sit in quite the same way as it did, as it would have been like the first movie. And then I realized something. Wait a minute, this guy has made artificial life forms. He's put them in little tiny jars, and then he says he's made up like a human brain, just grown it. Dude, this guy's mastered stem cell research. Hey, I swear, that's the only thing it's gotta be. He has perfected stem cell research, and now he's grown a fully grown human brain to be transplanted to a dead body. Dude! Do you know what you can do with this? He could have, I mean, it was like whatever this era was, he just revolutionized the field of science. Why didn't he just go into that? And he'd be making, like, replacement limbs and all this stuff. I can't believe he's just wasting his time trying to make, like, a freaking lady. Seriously! You gotta be freaking kidding me! Anyway, moving on. So we get that introduction, and, all throughout the movie, Pretorius is just pressuring Frankenstein. They're like, oh, you must help me make a new monster. I'm not gonna make another man monster. Not a monster man, monster woman. And it's like, well, I guess it makes sense, kind of, yeah, making a lady monster, just kind of weird. And then, we get back to the monster. We see what sort of craziness that poor guy has been through. And it's pretty much the same thing, you know, he's just miles of business actually trying to help people, and people are trying to kill him. It's just really sad. And again, I think it's the strongest point, one of the stronger points of the movie. And then he eventually finds, like, the hut where the blind man lives, because he can hear the violin music. And that whole sequence where he makes friends with the blind man is just one of the most poignant scenes I've ever seen in the movie. I mean, you can really feel for this guy. It's like, finally, the monster has somebody who won't run away from him. Sure, it's because he's blind, but yeah, it doesn't matter. And I think And after that scene, it's pretty clear that that just affects like the monster's whole philosophy after he learns to speak. That he realizes that it's good to have someone who cares about you, and it really influences his decisions later on in the movie. So later we find the monster actually meets Dr. Pretorius and comes up with the idea like, "What, friend? Good." Sorry about the terrible impression back there, but you know, just had to go out there. Yeah, so you get the idea. And then Pretorius manages to manipulate the monster into actually manipulating Frankenstein into actually helping Pretorius out with this new project. And I see here in that particular scene where Frankenstein and the monster are reunited as a clever commentary on the original movie. Now, you remember the first scenes in the movie, it was Frankenstein that was ordering the monster around, like, stand, sit, go over there, go over there. And this time, it's the monster that's doing that, because he knows he has the upper edge. And so the only way they could get Frankenstein to actually help Pretorius out with his new project is to kidnap his fiancée. Damsel in distress, everyone. Damsel in distress. And then we go to the lab scene where and they start actually working on the lady monster. And it's at that point that Frankenstein is like, you can tell he really does work on it, but he's kind of forced to, as opposed to the original movie. And let's see. Well, they get to the they finally make the she creature, and it turns out to be Mary Shelley, or rather, Elsa Lanchester. Yeah, that's her name, Elsa Lanchester. I think that was a very clever casting choice, because it really, I mean, in the first scenes of the movie, you know, where Lord Byron is talking to Shelley, he's like, "Who could have thought these pretty lands could have made such a horrific tale?" I think that's a very brilliant commentary, because like there was a dark side to everyone, and casting Elsa Lanchester as Mary Shelley, this pretty little young author, something way, and then we later see her as the monster, as the bride of Frankenstein. That really illustrates the dark side that goes on in people's imagination. Very clever. Kudos, movie. Kudos. You have my kudos. And now the following scene is just one of the saddest scenes. As the monster comes down, and he sees the bride, and he's got to think, well, this is it. I've got a lady friend now. Woohoo! And the lady friend is like, oh no, holy smack, you're ugly. And it's just really sad. But the monster does learn with it. Even lady monsters have standards. It's just really sad. And then later, and then once they beat Dr. Pretorius and Frankenstein save them, they just blow the building up. That's the end of the movie. Really sad. So, I'm not quite sure if I understand properly how Bride of Frankenstein is better than the original Frankenstein movie is. I mean, honestly, they do bring up the idea of a Bride of Frankenstein in the original book. Frankenstein actually got to work after the monster demands him to do it, but then he destroys it. So it's more like an afterthought than anything else, and they greatly expanded upon that in this movie. But honestly, it doesn't really work for me. I think the biggest problem there that the movie faces is how, like I've said, campy it is. With all the weird little humor jokes, it's just kind of, it's very distracting for me. And I think the scenes with like the monster work the most. Because like, there's the emotional core of the movie, the monster. I mean, if you don't feel sympathetic for the monster, I'm sorry, you are a soulless git. That's all there is. So yeah, there are my thoughts on Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. Now, again, I apologize for not having seen anything current in theaters, but you know what? Forget, this is a free country, I can review whatever I want, right? Anyway, well, I will make sure to see Man of Steel, and Pacific Rim is coming up. Definitely gonna see that. Oh yeah, giant monsters. I'm a giant monster fan. I just did a movie review on monsters! What do you expect? So yeah, thank you for taking some time to listen to me, and anyway, this is Movie Dragon 09.